Did you know these facts about New Year's resolutions? The tradition dates back over 4,000 years to Babylonians who made promises to their gods at the start of the year to return borrowed items and pay debts. The most popular resolutions, common ones, include exercising more, eating healthier, saving money, and learning new skills. These have stayed consistent for decades. Studies show that about 80% of resolutions fail by February, and only around 8 to 10% of people stick to them long term. People are more likely to succeed if they set specific measurable goals rather than vague ones. Based on late December polling from Newsweek and aggregated reporting, the top resolutions heading into 2026 is exercise more, that's chosen by 25% of resolution makers, be happier at 23%, eat healthier at 22%, and save more money at 21%. That's according to Newsweek. Did you know on January 15th, 1919, Boston's North End was struck by one of the strongest disasters in American history, the Great Molasses Flood. A massive steel tank holding over 2.3 million gallons of molasses suddenly ruptured. The sticky liquid surged through the streets at an estimated 35 miles per hour, creating a wave of up to 25 feet high. Buildings were crushed, vehicles overturned, and people and animals were swept away in the thick, fast-moving flood. In total, 21 people lost their lives and around 150 people were injured. The cause of the disaster was a combination of poor engineering and sudden temperature changes. The tank, owned by the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, had been hastily constructed and never properly tested. On that unusually warm January day, fermentation inside the tank likely produced gas, increasing internal pressure until the structure gave way. Imagine being a soldier in World War II. You're tired, hungry, and deep behind enemy lines. You reach into your pack for a chocolate bar, but instead of a sweet treat, you bite into something so bitter and hard, it feels like punishment. Why would the military do this? The U.S. Army developed the D ration in 1937. It wasn't designed for taste. It was designed for survival. But here's the twist. It was intentionally made to taste bad. Why? Because the Army didn't want soldiers eating it as a snack. These bars were for emergencies only, when no other food was available. Soldiers hated it. They joked that the D ration could break your teeth. Some even said it tasted worse than soap. The texture was so hard that you had to shave pieces off or melt it in hot water just to eat it. Still, these rations saved lives when food was scarce. So just remember that the next time you enjoy a smooth, sweet chocolate bar. Colonel Paul D. Logan served as a United States Army quartermaster before and during World War II. In the mid-1930s, Logan held the position of Deputy Director of Subsistence Division within the Office of the Quartermaster General. Logan collaborated with Hershey Chocolate Corporation to formulate an emergency ration bar that provided high nutritional value, resisted melting, and crucially tasted intentionally unappealing. His directive was that it should taste only a little better than a boiled potato to discourage everyday snacking. Over approximately 300 experimental formulations were created, including extreme attempts using kerosene to reduce taste's appeal, before landing on a final recipe comprised of oat flour, skim milk, powder, cocoa butter, and chocolate liqueur with minimal sugar, resulting in a bitter, dense bar. Each bar weighed 4 ounces, delivered 600 calories, and stayed solid under heat. Samuel Forey Hinkle graduated from Penn State in 1922 with a degree in industrial engineering. He joined Hershey as a plant chemist in November of 1924. In 1937, U.S. Army Quartermaster Captain Paul Logan partnered with Hershey President William Murray and Chief Chemist Sam Hinkle. The military needed a heat-resistant, high-calorie chocolate bar that was unpalatably bitter, just tasty enough to sustain troops in emergencies. Hinkle experimented with over 300 recipes to achieve a mandated toughness and bitterness. The resulting mixture was so thick that it couldn't be molded using standard chocolate equipment. It had to be kneaded and hand-pressed into molds. After initial testing, the Field Ration D, or the Logan Bar, was approved and mass-produced. Under Hinkle's guidance, Hershey scaled output to 24 million bars weekly by 1945, totaling over 3 billion bars during the war. Did you know the Farmer's Almanac was founded in 1818 by astronomer-poet David Young and publisher Jacob Mann? The Farmer's Almanac has been published annually without interruption. Published by Almanac Publishing Company, now part of Geiger, Lewiston, and Maine, it's an annual periodical featuring 16 months of long-range weather forecasts for 7 U.S. zones and Canada, released every August. Calendars, folklore, lunar phases, gardening and fishing advice, recipes, natural remedies, and best day timing for activities. The Almanac claims an 85% accuracy rate, though independent analysis suggests it may perform closer to chance, around 55% accuracy. In November of 2025, the team announced that the 2026 edition will be the last, ending a 208-year run. Reasons include rising production costs and declining readership as more users rely on instant digital forecasts. Hugo Gernsback, editor, inventor, and a founding figure in science fiction, created the isolator to help writers and thinkers concentrate deeply. He believed that the human mind was constantly derailed by distractions like street noise, slamming doors, or even a fly on the wall. His solution: a full-head helmet that muted sights and sounds to force-focus the mind. Initially crafted from wood, cork, and felt, the helmet later ditched wood for better performance. The helmet included 3 small glass panels for vision and a baffle for breathing. The first version blocked about 75% of ambient noise, later refined to block up to 90 to 95%. Gernsback attached a tube to ensure the wearer could breathe while enclosed. Users reportedly got drowsy after around 15 minutes, likely due to sensory deprivation. Only about 11 helmets were ever made. Despite Gernsback's optimism and a patent, the device vanished by 1926. Did you know the baby cage was introduced in the 1930s, primarily in urban areas like London and New York? At the time, many families lived in small apartments without access to outdoor space. Fresh air and sunlight were considered essential for a child's health, so parents sought creative solutions to give babies outdoor exposure. The baby cage was a wire enclosure that attached to the outside of a window, resembling a bird cage for infants. It allowed babies to nap or play suspended several stories above the street. The cages were often lined with blankets and sometimes included a safety harness. They were marketed as a practical way to ensure children receive sunlight and ventilation without leaving the apartment. Initially, baby cages were endorsed by health organizations like the London Health Society, which believed fresh air prevented rickets and other ailments. However, concerns about safety and the psychological impact of dangling babies outside windows eventually led to their decline. Did you know the portable sauna suit, also known historically as a rubber or vinyl sweatsuit, traces its modern roots back to the late 1960s amidst the rise of synthetic athletic wear? Early versions were made of rubberized cloth designed to retain heat and dramatically increase sweating during exercise. These suits were marketed for rapid weight loss through water weight reduction. In the 1960s and 70s, transition from heavy rubber to more flexible PVC and coated nylons improved comfort while keeping the suit's heat-trapping properties. In the 1980s through the 2000s, continued development using neoprene-like blends and lightweight polymers. These advanced versions retained body heat better and offered slightly improved breathability for fitness enthusiasts. These sauna suits were widely embraced in the fitness and sports communities, especially among wrestlers and boxers cutting weight before competition. However, this trend raised serious health concerns, including documented cases of hyperthermia and organ failure. As a result, governing bodies like the U.S. High School Athletic Associations banned sauna suit use in 1977, followed by the NCAA in 2013. Today, sauna suits are constructed from safer, eco-friendly materials. They're positioned more as training tools designed to increase heart rate and calorie burn, rather than extreme weight-cutting devices. Some feature moisture-wicking layers to improve comfort and reduce health risks. From ancient ceremonial use of heat to modern wearable fitness gear, sauna suits highlight a long-standing human fascination with sweating as a mode of cleansing and performance. Although they started as simple water weight loss tools, today's designs reflect a more nuanced understanding of health, safety, and athletic benefits. Imagine riding your bike straight into a lake and not sinking. In 1932, French inventor Charles Mouchet introduced the cyclomer, a bicycle designed to travel on both land and water. That was the dream behind this quirky creation. The cyclomer looked like a regular bike, but with hollow pontoons attached to its wheels for buoyancy. The idea was simple: pedal on land, then keep pedaling across rivers or lakes. It technically worked, but steering and stability on water were a nightmare. Despite its novelty, the cyclomer never became mainstream, but it remains one of history's most unusual attempts at amphibious transportation. The invention captured the imagination of an era fascinated by futuristic transportation. Today, the cyclomer is remembered as a quirky piece of transportation history, representing the era's fascination with futuristic and multi-purpose inventions. So would you ride a bike that floats? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more weird inventions from history coming in the next week. Did you know French hairstylist Alexandre Ferdinand Godefroy created the first hairdryer around 1888 to 1890, introducing a large bonnet-like helmet connected via a hose to a gas stove chimney. Clients would sit beneath it to dry their hair using hot air. It was stationary, cumbersome, and required steam vents to avoid burning the wearer. In 1908, Gabriel M. Kanzanjian, an Armenian-American inventor from Chicago, applied for a U.S. patent titled hair dryer. The patent was granted in June of 1911, detailing a handheld electric device with a fan and heater capable of blowing either heated or cool air. By circa 1920, commercial handheld hair dryers appeared on the market. These early models were relatively light, with approximately 100 watts of power, though they still had issues like overheating and occasional electrocution. Saloon hooded dryers resembling modern ones became common in the interwar period, especially by the 1930s. Bonnet dryers emerged in 1951, designed for home use. Compact boxes with hoses attached to bonnets that could be worn comfortably. The introduction of plastic casings in the 1960s reduced weight significantly. In 1954, GEC redesigned dryers with internal motors for added safety. By the 1970s, safety standards for hair dryers solidified in the US, and consumer handheld models became lighter, more powerful, and widely available. Ceramic heating elements became common by the 2000s, offering rapid, evenly distributed warmth. Innovations like ionic, tourmaline, and infrared technologies emerged, improving drying speed while reducing frizz. In 2004, Dyson revolutionized the field with the bladeless supersonic hairdryer, offering advanced hair flow control and heat regulation. This lineage, starting from salon bonnets to contemporary engineering marvels, highlights the transformation of hairdryers from static heat hazard gear into safe, efficient, and styleable devices. In March 1949, the American Mary Lee Corporation of Brooklyn, led by inventor and novelty gadget pioneer Victor Hoflich, introduced the Man from Mars radio hat. This pith helmet-style hat contained a vacuum tube, AM radio with a loop antenna, and tuning knob, and retailed for $7.95, available in 8 bright colors. Hoflich held a press conference featuring teens modeling the hat, triggering widespread coverage across newspapers and magazines coast to coast. Inside were 2 vacuum tubes and a rotatable loop antenna built into the hat's crown. The batteries, one 22.5 volt B battery with 2 A cells, were carried in a pocket and connected by a lead cable. Users listened via earphones clipped on either side of the helmet. It had approximate reception range of 20 miles, though performance suffered when the wearer turned their head to do the directional antenna. The hat was featured on the June 1949 cover of Radio Electronics, modeled by actress Hope Lang, then 15 years old. Despite extensive hype, the novelty wore off quickly. Ads disappeared by early 1950 as sales dwindled. Even by 1955, Hoflich acknowledged that product had ceased, though the company still received sporadic orders. There were earlier variants. A 1931 British radio hat appeared in Pathotone Weekly, apparently designed by a Berlin engineer. year, representing an earlier experiment in wearable radios. A 1920s era image from the Library of Congress shows a radio-equipped hat, suggesting wearable radio concepts date back further. The radio hat exemplifies early wearable technology and consumer novelty during the pre-transistor era. Though it quickly faded from popularity, it's remembered as a bold fusion of fashion and function, a precursor to personal audio gadgets we take for granted today. The Kitty's motor wheel, introduced in 1927, was an experimental children's motorized ride-on device. The Kitty's motor wheel consisted of a central motorized chassis supporting the child, enclosed by a broad ring-shaped wheel that served as the primary moving element. The rider sat inside the wheel's diameter, steering from within as the device rolled. The Kitty's motor wheel emerged during a period of experimentation with single-wheel and unconventional personal vehicles. In the early 20th century, mono wheels fascinated inventors and audiences alike, though most remain novelties rather than mass-market products. Ultimately, the Kitty's motor wheel never became a commercial toy or mainstream children's vehicle. It appears to have existed primarily as a novelty, rather than a product marketed through catalogs or toy manufacturers of the era. Concerns over safety combined with mechanical complexity of monowheel systems meant it stood more as a brief, inventive curiosity than a viable children's ride-on machine. The concept of motorized roller skates emerged surprisingly early in the 20th century, beginning with experimental gasoline-powered designs in France. One of the earliest known examples was created by inventor M. Constantini. Each skate contained its own small four-stroke engine, along with a carburetor, ignition battery, and spark coil, an extraordinary level of miniaturization for the era. These skates were reported to reach speeds up to 34 miles per hour, though such performance was likely theoretical given the reliability of early engines and the inherent instability of skates. Constantini's invention required users to wear a belt-mounted fuel tank and ignition components, making the system both ingenious and unwieldy. Experiments continued through the 1920s when newspapers reported on German acetylene-powered roller skates in 1926. These designs reflected growing interwar enthusiasm for compact personal transportation technologies. The device, described seriously in contemporary press, used small acetylene motors attached to skates, representing an alternative approach to internal combustion propulsion. The concept captured public imagination at the time, appearing as yet another attempt to merge speed, novelty, and mobility in a single personal device. The most famous and commercially ambitious version arrived in the mid-20th century, led by inventor Antonio Pirello, who founded the motorized roller skate company of Detroit in 1955. By 1956, his company began producing skates powered by a 19-pound gasoline engine worn like a backpack. These skates transferred power to the right foot, while the left acted as the steering mechanism, a design that required considerable skill to operate. A handheld cable functioned as the clutch and speed control, allowing users to reach speeds reportedly up to 40 miles per hour. The price, $250, equivalent to roughly $2,300 today, and the inherent safety risks limited widespread adoption. The skates nevertheless received significant media attention, appearing in Life, Popular Mechanics, and television programs such as You Asked For It and The Today Show. Public fascination peaked in the early 1960s with a widely circulated photograph of salesman Mike Dreschler, seen refueling his motorized skates at a gas station near Hartford, Connecticut in 1961. Reports describe the skates as powered by 1-horsepower air-cooled engine strapped to his back with controls held to his hand, closely mirroring Pirello's design. While the skates could reportedly reach around 17 miles per hour, in practice they lacked brakes, adding to their reputation for danger. The famous photo helped solidify motorized roller skates as a symbol of mid-century technological eccentricity, inventive, ambitious, and ultimately too hazardous for mainstream use. Did you know the decision to make U.S. presidential terms 4 years long comes directly from Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution, which establishes that the president shall hold his office during the term of 4 years. This length was not chosen arbitrarily, rather it was the result of extended debate during the Constitutional Convention of 1787, where delegates weighed multiple term length proposals ranging from 3 to 7 years. Their goal was to design an executive office strong enough to lead the new new nation effectively while preventing the rise of a figure resembling a monarch. Some feared that too short a term, such as 3 years, would leave presidents unable to pursue long-term policy. Others warned that lengthy terms, like 7 years, could create a dangerously insulated executive. The final decision, a 4-year term with the option for re-election, was seen as a middle ground that provided continuity while still allowing voters to replace a president who failed to meet expectations. The two-term tradition for the United States presidency was an unwritten rule in early U.S. history. It began when George Washington voluntarily stepped down after 2 terms, setting a powerful precedent that future presidents felt obligated to follow. This norm emphasized avoiding the appearance of monarchy, ensuring rotation in leadership, and protecting the young republic from concentrated executive power. Presidents such as Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe also honored the tradition, strengthening it as a core democratic expectation. While it was not legally binding, it shaped presidential behavior for more than 150 years. The tradition was finally broken when Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected to 3rd and 4th terms, which raised national concern about extended executive power. In response, the U.S. formalized the tradition by passing the 22nd Amendment in 1951, legally limiting presidents to 2 elected terms. Did you know Franklin D. Roosevelt broke the long-standing 2-term tradition as sitting president for a combination of historical circumstance, public support, and national crisis? When FDR approached what would have been the end of his 2nd term in 1940, the country was still struggling to recover from the Great Depression, the worst economic crisis in U.S. history. His New Deal programs were widely seen as stabilizing forces, and many Americans believed switching presidents could jeopardize the fragile progress being made. This widespread support created strong public pressure for him to remain in office. By 1940, World War II had already begun in Europe. Many Americans feared that changing leadership during such a dangerous global moment could undermine national security. Roosevelt's experience and steady leadership were viewed as essential in guiding the country through the growing international crisis. This contributed heavily to public willingness to break tradition and re-elect him. Before the 22nd Amendment in 1951, there was no legal restriction on the number of presidential terms. The 2-term limit was simply a norm established by George Washington and followed voluntarily by nearly every president afterward. FDR did not violate any constitutional rule. He merely chose not to follow the precedent. FDR remained highly popular, and many voters believed no other candidate had the leadership qualities needed to handle the overlapping crisis. His vision, communication skills such as his fireside chats, and political success made him a trusted figure at a time when Americans craved stability. The combination of a domestic economic emergency and a looming global conflict created an environment where continuity of leadership felt not only beneficial but necessary. Roosevelt and his supporters argued that extraordinary times justified an extraordinary break from tradition. Did you know Americans in the early 20th century did briefly send children through the U.S. Postal Service? When the United States Postal Service introduced parcel post on January 1st of 1913, it allowed packages heavier than 4 pounds to be mailed for the first time. Regulations were vague, and technically nothing said you couldn't mail a child, so a handful of families tried it. The first known mailed child was James Beagle, an 8-month-old from Ohio. His parents paid 15 cents in stamps and insured him for $50 before a mail carrier delivered him a short distance to his grandmother. The most famous case, Charlotte May Pierstorff, age 4 or 5, sources vary, but mailed 73 to 75 miles by train in Idaho in 1914 because postage was cheaper than a ticket. She rode along with a relative who worked for the railway mail service. After several headline-making incidents, the Postmaster General issued a formal rule in 1914 stating that humans could not be mailed. Actual enforcement ended the practice around 1915. Did you know when the U.S. Mint opened in Philadelphia in 1793, the coins it produced were made of copper, silver, and gold in accordance with the Coinage Act of 1792? Because coins of this era were made of precious metal, they were vulnerable to a practice known as clipping, which involved cutting off a small portion around the circumference of the coins. A skilled clipper would shave off enough from the coins to eventually amass a quantity of scrap metal worth cashing in, while also ensuring that the coins weren't conspicuously reduced in size or weight, allowing the altered coins to still be spent. Clipping had been common in 17th century Europe, and it was so prevalent in England that by the end of that century, almost half of the silver content was absent from circulating English coins. This resulted in the metal composition of the coins being lower than their face value, a discrepancy that threatened to create a financial crisis throughout the continent, as well as in the European colonies. In order to combat the practice, England began minting coins with rigid edges. A smooth edge on any part of a coin would then be a telltale sign of clipping. When the United States was founded as an independent nation, the U.S. Mint followed suit by designing its higher denomination coins with reeded edges right from the beginning. The coins start as flat discs, referred to as blanks, cut from large sheets of metal. After undergoing a heat treatment to soften the metal, they are eventually loaded into a press room where a die stamps the image onto the coin. The outer section of the die, called the collar, is what creates the reading on the edge of the coin. When the composition of the coins changed after the Coinage Act of 1965, the U.S. Mint could either buy new master dies to eliminate reading or keep the equipment they already had. Since there was no detriment to continuing with reeded edges, there was no reason to take on the cost of replacing the equipment. While the master die was eventually replaced with today's modern machinery, reeded edges remain as a sensory aid for those with visual impairments, as a way to distinguish between pennies versus dimes and nickels versus quarters. Did you know airplane chimes are the audible alert tones you hear during a flight, commonly the familiar ding or ding-dong? They are part of the aircraft's internal communication system and are used to send coded messages between the cockpit, flight attendants, and passengers. Airplane chimes are intentional audio signals generated by the aircraft's cabin communication system. They serve to alert flight attendants to cockpit messages, notify crew about flight phase change, signal passenger requests, indicate safety or operational status changes. They're essentially nonverbal cues that help coordinate cabin operations safely and discreetly. The first formal reference to the familiar Bing Bong cabin chimes appears in the ARINC characteristic 715 Airborne Passenger Address Amplifier Standard, originally published in 1978. The standard defined a built-in electronic chime generator, two-tone chime sequence, specific tone frequencies, timing and decay characteristics, multiple chime functions for passenger call, crew communication, and alerts. The adoption of chimes in the late 1970s reflects several aviation needs of the time. As aircraft cabins became larger and more complex, airlines needed consistent nonverbal signals for crew communication, a way to alert crew without using a PA system, reliable tones that could be heard over engine and airflow noise. Before chimes were electronically generated, earlier aircraft used light indicators and tone-based alerts from third-party interphone systems. After ARINC 715, aircraft manufacturers incorporated the chime system into all modern commercial jets beginning in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Airlines adopted variations of the standardized tone sequences, and by the 1990s, nearly all commercial aircraft worldwide used cabin chimes for passenger calls, altitude cues, and crew communication. This universal adoption is why the familiar Bing Bong sound is heard today on nearly every airline. Despite the standardization of tone characteristics, airlines developed their own internal chime codes, making chimes a kind of 30,000-foot Morse system for crew communication. This variation reflects operational performances rather than origin itself. Did you know aerosol cans are sealed, pressurized containers designed to dispense products as a fine mist, spray, or foam when a user presses a button or actuator? An aerosol can is a self-contained dispensing system that uses pressurized propellant gas to push a product out through a valve and nozzle in a controlled spray. The idea behind aerosol technology dates back to 1790 when France introduced self-pressurized carbonated beverages, demonstrating early principles of pressure-based dispensing. In 1837, an inventor named Perpignan created a soda siphon with a valve, further advancing pressurized dispensing mechanisms. In 1862, early metal spray can prototypes were tested using heavy steel, but these designs were too bulky for practical use. In 1899, inventors Helbling and Percht patented an aerosol system using methyl and ethyl chloride as propellants. The industry's breakthrough came in 1949 when Robert H. Eplanop invented the crimp-on valve, making aerosol cans cheap, reliable, and mass-productible. His patent was filed in 1949 and granted in 1953, enabling widespread consumer products such as hairspray, deodorants, paints, and cleaners. The 1960s and 70s saw improvements to propellants, materials, and spray mechanisms as aerosol products rapidly expanded across consumer and industrial markets. By the 1970s, concerns about chlorofluorocarbon propellants and ozone depletion led to scientific scrutiny and eventually regulation. Chlorofluorocarbons were phased out in many countries, leading manufacturers to adopt hydrocarbons and compressed gases instead. Today, aerosols can use safer propellants such as hydrocarbons, CO2, and nitrous oxide. Depending on product use, the container is typically steel or aluminum with improved valves, linings, and recycling process. Did you know the toothpick is one of the oldest tools used by humans with origins that predate agriculture and written language? Archaeological evidence shows that early human ancestors, including Homo habilis and Homo erectus, used small sticks, bones, or blades of grass to clean between their teeth nearly 1.8 million years ago. Grooves found on fossil teeth indicate that these early versions of toothpicks were used both to remove food and to relieve irritation in the gums. In this sense, the toothpick may be considered one of humanity's earliest personal hygiene instruments. As civilizations emerged, toothpicks took on more refined forms. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, they were sometimes crafted from precious metals, ivory, or carefully carved wood. These early cultures viewed personal grooming as a sign of civility and status, and toothpicks were often carried in small cases as part of one's daily accessories. The tradition continued in classical Greece and Rome, where toothpicks made of bronze, silver, or even bird quails became commonplace. Roman writers mentioned them frequently, and while they were accepted tools of etiquette, using them at the dinner table was often discouraged in polite society. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the toothpick became both a utilitarian object and a sign of wealth. Members of the nobility owned ornate toothpicks made of gold, silver, or jeweled metals, sometimes worn as pendants or carried in elaborate cases. At large banquets, disposable picks made from feathers were commonly provided for guests. Over time, the toothpick evolved into a symbol of refinement, as well as a practical item for maintaining oral cleanliness. The modern wooden toothpick traces its origins to the 19th century and to an American entrepreneur named Charles Forrester. Inspired by the hand-carved hardwood toothpicks he encountered in Brazil, Forrester believed the United States lacked a comparable product. Working with the machinist Benjamin Franklin Sturtevant, he created a machine able to mass-produce toothpicks from birchwood. Forrester then used clever marketing tricks such as paying Harvard students to ask for toothpicks in stores to build demand. By the late 19th century, disposable wooden toothpicks had become a common household item in America and an early example of a successful disposable consumer product. Throughout the 20th century, toothpicks became widespread in restaurants, homes, and food presentation. They appeared at cash registers and in diners, and they became part of American popular culture, even serving as props in Western films that portrayed cowboys with toothpicks clenched between their teeth. Many cultures developed distinctive versions. Japan's bamboo yoji was a small carved notch. China China's and Korea's smooth bamboo picks and decorative cocktail picks that became staples in bars and catering. However, the rise of dental floss and changing attitudes about public grooming led to a gradual decline in everyday toothpick use. Today, toothpicks remain familiar objects, though more specialized than before. They serve practical roles in cuisine, from securing sandwiches to decorating cocktails, and they also exist as artisanal or luxury items, such as flavored or scented wooden picks. Sustainable materials like bamboo have gained popularity, and some consumers use reusable metal or plastic versions. Although their everyday use has diminished in some regions, the toothpick endures as a simple ancient tool that has accompanied humans from early prehistory to the present day. Did you know the history of fire-starting matches begins long before actual matches existed, at a time when making fire required rubbing wood, striking flint and steel, or carefully preserving embers so a flame would not have to be rekindled? Archaeological evidence shows that even 5,300 years ago, people like the Alpine Iceman carried insulated containers intended to hold glowing embers for later use, underscoring how difficult starting a fire once was. The first true predecessors of matches appeared in China. By 577 AD, small pine wood sticks coated with sulfur were used to catch and extend existing flames rather than ignite through friction. These early devices, described as light-bringing slaves or fire-inch sticks, were documented during a military siege and later appeared in texts such as the records of the unworldly and the strange. Around 950 AD, they represented a significant shift toward portable fire-making tools, although they were not yet self-igniting. European experimentation began much later. In 1669, Henrik Brandt accidentally discovered phosphorus during alchemical pursuits, and by 1680, Robert Boyle had used phosphorus and sulfur to produce a friction-based ignition system. However, these early methods were expensive, unstable, and dangerous, preventing widespread adoption. The first modern self-igniting match emerged in 1805, invented by Jean Chancel, whose match required dipping the head, made from potassium chlorate, sulfur, sugar, and rubber, into a small bottle of sulfuric acid. This produced flame, but was too hazardous, slow, and impractical to become commercially useful. Other designs appeared, such as the 1828 Promethean match, which relied on breaking a glass capsule containing acid to ignite its chemical coating, but its high cost and danger similarly prevented widespread use. A major breakthrough came in 1826 and 1827 when English pharmacist John Walker accidentally created what became known as friction lights, later called lucifers. His mixture of antimony sulfide and potassium chlorate ignited when scraped against a rough surface, making these the first commercially viable strike-ignitable matches. Although they produced unpleasant odors and dangerous sparks, they were widely adopted and marked the first time people could reliably create fire with a simple stroke. These matches soon inspired improvements across Europe. By the 1830s, manufacturers introduced phosphorus-based formulas that ignited more smoothly on friction. However, these early strike-anywhere matches relied on white phosphorus, a chemical so toxic that a single pack could contain enough to kill a person, and striking them accidentally could cause unintended fires. In 1836, Hungarian chemist Hanna Sarini introduced a safer and quieter match by replacing potassium chlorate with lead dioxide, creating what became known as the silent or noiseless match. Though Irini sold his patent cheaply and never benefited financially, his innovation laid groundwork for safer match production. The next major leap was the invention of the safety match. In 1844, Swedish inventor Gustaf Erik Pasch separated the ignition chemicals, moving phosphorus to the striking surface instead of the match head. John Edvard Ludstrom improved this design in 1854, enabling large-scale safe manufacturing. This separation of chemicals eliminated white phosphorus poisoning in Europe and remains the foundation of modern safety match design. Modern matches fall into two main categories: strike-anywhere and safety matches. Strike-anywhere matches keep the phosphorus compound in the match head and can ignite on many rough surfaces. Safety matches require a specially prepared striking strip containing phosphorus, transferring ignition heat heat only on contact. The heads of modern matches typically include an ignition agent, usually a phosphorus compound, oxidizers such as potassium chlorate, binders like starch or glue, fillers, and inert materials that regulate burning. These ingredients allow reliable ignition from friction and a controlled burn once lit. Did you know lighters trace their origins to early fire-starting methods such as flint and steel, which were used for centuries before any true ignition device existed? The first real lighter appeared in 1823 when German chemist Johann Wolfgang Duberreiner introduced a device known as Duberreiner's lamp. It generated hydrogen gas through a chemical reaction between zinc and sulfuric acid, which would ignite upon touching a platinum catalyst. Although innovative, the device was bulky, fragile, and expensive, making it impractical for everyday personal use. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, lighter technology dramatically improved with the introduction of the flint and wheel mechanism. This design used ferrocerium to create sparks when scraped by a metal wheel, igniting a wick soaked in liquid fuel like naphtha. During World War I, soldiers commonly repurposed spent cartridge cases into makeshift lighters using this method, accelerating public demand for portable and reliable ignition tools. A major leap came in 1933 with the founding of the Zippo Manufacturing Company by George G. Blaisdell. Zippo lighters featured a wind-resistant chimney, a durable metal case, and a dependable flint wheel ignition system. Their rugged and lifetime warranty helped establish them as cultural icons, especially during World War II and in later decades of movies and popular culture. Zippo's refinement of the classic liquid fuel lighter set the standard for reliability. The next breakthrough arrived in the 1950s with the introduction of butane-fueled lighters. Butane allowed for a clean-burning, adjustable flame that could be precisely controlled, a significant improvement over the messier liquid fuel designs. The development of piezoelectric ignition in the 1960s and 1970s, where a crystal generates a spark when compressed, further improved convenience by eliminating the need for flints and making ignition more dependable in adverse conditions. Mass-produced disposable lighters emerged in the 1970s, led by companies like Bic, which created inexpensive, consistent, and safe devices that dominated the consumer market. These lighters used molded plastic bodies, pre-pressurized butane, and eventually child-resistant features, making them both practical and widespread. From the 1990s onward, specialty and high-performance designs expanded the field. Torch lighters using high-pressure butane jets to produce extremely hot, wind-proof flames became popular for outdoor activities, cigars, and culinary uses. In the 2010s, electric plasma lighters appeared using rechargeable batteries to create windproof electrical arcs rather than flames. These fuel-free designs represent the most recent stage in the evolution of lighter technology. Did you know the International Space Station is a large, permanently crewed orbital laboratory that has circled Earth for more than 25 years? It typically orbits at an altitude of about 260 miles and serves as a global collaboration between NASA, Rascamus, the European Space Agency, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency. Over its lifetime, the station has housed more than 280 visitors from 26 countries. It spans roughly 356 feet in length, about the size of an American football field, and contains multiple living and working areas including sleeping quarters, bathrooms, a gym, and a bay window offering 360-degree views of Earth. As a microgravity research platform, the ISS supports scientific investigations across physics, biology, earth sciences, and technology development. It has enabled breakthroughs in understanding human health in space, such as how microgravity affects circulation, vision, sleep, and bone density. Astronauts often contend with fluid shifts that cause congestion, headaches, and what they call space sniffles, while skin irritation and sleep disruption are also common due to the station's unique environment. Long-duration missions require astronauts to exercise about 2 hours each day to counteract the loss of muscle and bones that occurs without gravity. More complex effects, including spaceflight-associated neuro-ocular syndrome, can result in long-term vision changes. The ISS has aged significantly since its first components launched in 1998. Modules such as the Zarya and Unity will reach the end of their structural life by 2028, and although some components like solar arrays can be repaired and replaced, many primary structural elements cannot. Years of thermal cycling, docking stresses, and natural material fatigue have made indefinite operation impractical. These limitations, along with evolving goals for low Earth orbit activities, have led NASA and its partners to plan for the station's retirement. They intend to support operations through 2030 before transitioning scientific work to commercially operated space stations. Once ISS operations conclude, the station will not be abandoned or allowed to fall uncontrolled. Instead, NASA and its international partners will carry out a carefully managed deorbit procedure to ensure safety. The ISS will be guided to Earth's atmosphere in a controlled descent targeted at Point Nemo in the South Pacific, the most remote location on the planet and long used as a disposal site for large spacecraft. This controlled approach is necessary because the station's size means that many components would survive re-entry and random descent would pose unacceptable risks. NASA has contracted SpaceX to build a dedicated U.S. deorbit vehicle based on the Dragon spacecraft. After the crew departs, the station will gradually descend for roughly 12 to 18 months before the deorbit vehicle performs the final maneuver to ensure it breaks apart safely above Point Nemo. Did you know we know something smells bad because of how our brain interprets certain chemical signals combined with biological survival instincts and personal experience? When something has a smell, it releases volatile molecules into the air. These molecules enter your nose as you breathe and bind to specialized olfactory receptors at the top of your nasal cavity. Different receptors detect different molecular shapes. This is how your body recognizes thousands of smells. Once receptors detect the molecules, they send signals to the olfactory bulb in your brain. From there, the signals go to areas involved in emotion, memory, and decision making. Because odor processing is tied to emotion and memory, bad smell is not just detection, it's interpretation. In many cases, humans find certain smells unpleasant because those odors historically signaled danger. Rotting food means harmful bacteria, decay means disease, smoke equals fire, and feces pathogens. Our ancestors, who avoided these dangers, were more likely to survive. Over time, humans developed an instinctive aversion to odors associated with risk. This is why many bad smells are universally disliked. Not all unpleasant smells are hardwired, some are learned. If you get sick after eating something, you may develop a strong aversion to its smell. Cultural exposure changes what is considered pleasant or disgusting. Foods that smell normal in one culture may smell strange in another. Your brain adjusts based on experience. Bad smells can trigger automatic responses such as gagging, pulling away, wrinkling your nose, and feeling nauseated. These reactions are protective. They help prevent ingestion of harmful substances. We know things smell bad because chemical receptors detect odor molecules. The brain evaluates the signals using emotion and memory. Evolution made us sensitive to odors that signal danger. Personal experience and culture shape what we dislike. Our bodies react instinctively to protect us. Did you know toilet paper, though now an essential part of daily life in much of the world, is a surprisingly modern invention when placed in context of human history? For thousands of years, people relied on natural materials or improvised tools to maintain personal hygiene, long before the idea of dedicated bathroom tissue emerged. The evolution of toilet paper from stones and sponges to perforated rolls and eco-friendly alternatives reflects changes in technology, culture, sanitation practices, and even global industrialization. In the ancient world, hygiene solutions were shaped almost entirely by environment. The Greeks used smooth stones or fragments of pottery, which were sometimes inscribed with names in what may have been an act of symbolic cleansing. The Romans developed a communal tool called the tersorium, a sponge affixed to a stick and stored in a bucket of salt water or vinegar between uses. uses. While this may seem unappealing to modern sensibilities, it represented an early form of intentional cleaning rather than improvisation. Elsewhere, materials varied widely. In parts of Europe and the Middle East, straw, hay, moss, or wool were common. In colder climates, snow served both as a cleanser and coolant, and in many regions, water alone, used by hand or with simple devices, provided the primary means of sanitation. These practices demonstrate not only resourcefulness, but also the continued absence of purpose-made products for personal cleaning. The first known use of paper specifically for hygiene can be traced to China. As early as the 6th century, written sources describe the use of paper for cleaning the body, an innovation made possible by China's centuries-long leadership in papermaking. By the 14th century, production had scaled dramatically, especially within the imperial court. Records from this period document the annual manufacture of millions of sheets produced in large formats and sometimes scented to enhance comfort. This development, while remarkable, remained largely confined to China. Other regions either lacked access to affordable paper or continued to rely on long-established customs. Still, the Chinese practice foreshadowed what toilet paper would become centuries later, a manufactured product designed for softness, convenience, and sanitation. The modern era of toilet paper began in the 19th century, a time of rapid industrial and technological change. In 1857, Joseph Gayeti introduced the first commercially marketed toilet paper in the United States. Packaged in flat sheets and infused with aloe, Gayeti's product was promoted as a medical aid intended to prevent hemorrhoids. Despite its novelty, many consumers were reluctant to pay for something that could easily be replaced by newspaper, catalog pages, or other inexpensive paper products. The real breakthrough occurred in 1871 when Seth Wheeler patented toilet paper on a roll with perforations, creating the format that remains standard today. This innovation coincided with two major social shifts: expanding paper manufacturing and the rise of indoor plumbing. In 1890, the Scott Paper Company seized the moment by mass-producing rolled toilet paper and marketing it as safe for modern plumbing systems, an important selling point at a time when clogged pipes were a costly concern. By the end of the century, toilet paper rolls were steadily gaining acceptance as a household commodity. Throughout the 20th century, improvements in quality and comfort transformed toilet paper from a utilitarian necessity into a competitive consumer product. In 1928, the Hoburg Paper Company, later rebranded as Charmin, introduced two-ply toilet paper, emphasizing softness over strict practicality. Manufacturers refined the paper-making process to remove splinters and other impurities. By the 1940s, the introduction of truly soft, splinter-free tissue in Britain marked a turning point in product quality. After World War II, toilet paper consumption expanded rapidly across industrialized nations as economic prosperity increased access to consumer goods. Advertising became central to brand success, with emphasis placed on absorbency, texture, and comfort, features once unimaginable in earlier centuries. By the late 20th century, toilet paper was not only standardized, but diversified with variations in thickness, fragrance, embossing, and overall feel. In the 21st century, toilet paper continues to evolve in response to changing consumer values and environmental concerns. Many modern products incorporate recycled fibers or alternative materials such as bamboo, reducing reliance on virgin wood pulp. Certification programs highlight sustainable forestry and eco-friendly production methods. At the same time, technological innovations, especially the growing popularity of bidet attachments and integrated bidet toilets, have begun to influence household consumption patterns, with some individuals using less toilet paper or abandoning it entirely. Global events such as the supply chain disruption during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic also underscored how deeply toilet paper is woven into daily routine and cultural expectations. Although toilet paper is now ubiquitous in many parts of the world, its story is one of gradual adaptation rather than inevitability. From the simple stones and sponges of antiquity to the soft multi-ply rolls of today, toilet paper represents an evolving intersection of necessity, technology, and social norms. Its development reflects larger shifts in sanitation, industry, and consumer behavior, demonstrating that even the most ordinary objects have complex and surprisingly global histories.